So at the end of the last video, we talked a little bit about visibility, and what it means for variables within a class to be public or private. So variables and methods that are labeled as public can be accessed anywhere that you have access to the instance. So this means that after we instantiate a particular object, anything that's public can be accessed directly, right? But variables and methods that are labeled as private can only be accessed within methods defined in the class. So if we go back to the example that we've had running through this sort of series of videos, we have all of our instance variables, our name, our ID, our email address, and then we have a public method called email length, which returns the length of the email address. And then we have our constructor, which we give it our name, our ID, and our email address, and it sets all of those things up for us when it creates the object. So in this case, we could have this little bit of code, say, in our main function somewhere else, right? So let's say that this is in, our main.java, and this is main, blah, 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 gets this code here, right? So that's how I'm thinking about this, right? This code is somewhere else, and given what we have as far as this class goes, we can use the default constructor and manually set the name, ID, and email address. We could use the constructor that we've written and set the name, ID, and email address, and then we can directly access the email address and get the length, or we can use the method that we've written to get the email address length, right? But what if I change, all of a sudden, I change the string, the name, to be private, right? Now I'm saying, well, okay, people outside of here can't see the name and can't do anything with it. Well, what that means is in this little bit of code, right, we can no longer set the name externally like this. Because now the string is private, I'm not within the class here, so that means that I can't alter the name of the class. Which means really, in essence, you can't do it this way anymore. You have to use the constructor. This constructor is still valid, right? Because the name is assigned here within the method, within the class itself, right? So that's okay. It's just when you access it from outside the class. And again, if we make the ID and the email address private, then you can't set the ID later. You can't set the email address later. You can't get the email address length directly anymore. The one thing it protects us from, though, is this line here where I accidentally overwrote the name of the second student with something else, right? Now, because the name is private, I can't make that mistake. Notice that I can still use the email address method to get the length of the email address. Right? I just can't do it directly. So really the point of having private things is so you want to protect yourself from making a mistake later on, right? By making the name, ID, and email address private, I can't make this mistake here, right? This, might be a mistake, it might not be, but this is not what the intended thing should have been, right? I don't want to try and change names. So by using the constructor as the only time we can set a name, that we can't change it later on by writing some code accidentally. So that's the main reasoning and sort of logistics behind public and private methods and variables. You'll see sort of as we get into more and more complicated programs this semester, you'll see why we want to use those. But these are the basic ideas and reasonings and we'll see more of the details a little bit later.